In today's video, I want to talk a book that was hyped a lot and in my opinion was not worth the hype and was not even worth reading, even though I did. So hello my fellow fantasy book lovers and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi and welcome. My name is Kathy, I'm a goth girl from Belgium who loves to read fantasy books. In today's video I'm actually doing something that I don't do very often, and it is talking negatively about books. Because I feel everyone can have a different opinion on a book, and also it's not because I don't like this book that you won't like this book, and maybe the reasons that I don't like it are the reasons that you might enjoy it. So please know that this video is my personal opinion on this particular book, or in this case two books, because it's a duology, and that by no means I'm attacking the author, because clearly they know how to write books, because otherwise I would have never finished the two books. But I want to talk about why I don't think this book should be hyped as much as it has. To end the suspense on which books I'm talking about, it is the Cat and Mouse duology by H.D. Carlton, meaning Haunting Adeline and Hunting Adeline. This book is sold as a stalker romance, fantasy romance, dark romance. This is not a romance book, peeps. Like, Jesus Christ. I was at Waterstones the last weekend and I was looking at a romance section because, well, there's often romances that I like to read. Bride from Hazelwood was in there as well. And then my eyes went a little bit when I saw Hunting Adeline in there. So I talked to the girl who I know that works there and I was like, hey, have you read that book? Why have you put it with the romance section? She's like, no, I actually haven't read it. We just got recommended it and so many people wanted to read it and they all thought it was a romance book. It's like, do you know what actually happens in that book? And I started explaining it to her. And I have never seen someone pull out a book and put it behind the register to put it with a different type of book so fast. I think they're gonna put it with the thriller type books or with the horror type books or something completely different. But I really hope they don't put it back with a romance, because whew, no. And the thing is, if you look online, because that's the way that I got to know it through TikTok. So on TikTok, there is a lot of book talks going on. And I remember it being promoted as a dark romance, a little bit of stalker, but it was recommended if you like. And then I think one of the books that was in there, if you like Fourth Wing, there is a world's difference between Fourth Wing and Hunting Adeline. Like, they're not remotely in the same realm, to me at least. So I actually went and looked up which other books are recommended if you enjoy Haunting Adeline. And here are some of the shocking books that were there, as in they're totally not similar to it. So in that list was Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, Hooked. I haven't actually read it. Den of Vipers, which I think is a mafia romance type series. And then also Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. Now, I don't know all of these books, but I do know that Crescent City is a fantasy city that is urban fantasy. I don't think it is a dark romance series where people get killed all the time. I'm not sure about Hooked and Den of Vipers because I personally haven't read those. But when reading the summaries, I wasn't exactly sure why those were compared to Haunting Adeline. And then, of course, not for Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, which is YA leaning on adult fantasy with dragons. Like, how, on which planet does that compare to Haunting Adeline? Now, I'm going to go into spoilers from here on. So I'm going to talk about Haunting Adeline, Book 1, and Hunting Adeline, Book 2. If you don't want any spoilers about these books, then I would recommend stopping watching right now. If you don't care, if you just want the info and to make sure if you ever want to read these books, then feel free to keep on watching. So in Haunting Adeline, book 1 of the duology, we have this girl who is an author and she is promoting her book, and someone, so the second character in this book, actually notices her at one of her book events and he falls madly in love with her on first sight. And he starts stalking her. Now this girl, she actually doesn't have a place at that time and she actually inherits the house of her grandparents, if I'm not mistaken. So it is this mansion in the middle of nowhere, like it's almost a castle-like situation. It has a wood around it and like everything. Now she lives totally alone in this very, very big house. And of course, the guy starts stalking her, breaking into the house. Up to there, it's fine. The first interaction between the two of them, he shoves a gun up her pussy. Yeah, you heard that right. And it's a sexual interaction between the two of them, and it's meant to shock her, but of course, she kind of enjoys it and he keeps coming back. So we get a secondary plotline in this book by the girl discovering a journal from her great-grandmother, if I'm not mistaken. And her great-grandma was actually murdered, and in that journal she finds out that the person that they have been blaming was maybe not the person that actually did it. So we think that, oh, maybe there's going to be like a murder investigation or something going on besides the stalking, but it fell flat to me. It wasn't necessary, it wasn't deep enough, it wasn't fleshed out enough. I still don't know the main character, what her actual interests are. I felt like this book, the first book then, was solely based on the stalking and on pressure and intimidation. And that's fine if you're into that thing, but I'm not specifically. And there are a lot of trigger warnings at the start of each of these books. Read them. Don't take them lightly. Read them and then decide if it's still for you. Continuing on in the first book, we know that the man that is stalking her, I can't remember the names for the Lord of me, but the man who's stalking her actually works for a company who releases girls and women from sexual trafficking. So we get to know that side of him a bit more. I don't know what happens with her. I think she's still writing or she doesn't write at the moment. I couldn't care less. She is not really the most interesting character out there, but she starts to get to know him better, and she wants to help him, I think, at the end of book one with one of the jobs that he has to do to free people from the sexual trafficking. Now, of course, because she is involved with him, she's also targeted and stuff, and at the end of book one, they both get kidnapped. Or they both get taken away, as they call it, I think. So in book two, which is Haunting Adeline, the male character actually is able to get freed from his situation rather fast, but she is into human trafficking for the majority of book two. We get a lot of very explicit descriptions. A lot of things happen in book two that still I just try to push in the very back corner of my mind to this day. There's hunting, so there's actually like a forest setting where rich people hunt the girls that are in this human trafficking. They are being educated on how to be the best, like sub, because they use the term sub and stuff for their male counterparts or the person who wants to buy them. So it's very explicit, and it wasn't really necessary. Like, I don't know what the hell was going on with book two. In book one, it could have been considered, oh yeah, stalker romance, but with the human trafficking part included, like, I don't know. For me, just no. And then in the second book, finally, he releases her. But still, I can't even remember the ending, if it was a happy ending or no. I just remember being very traumatized by reading this book. And I honestly regret it. Like, this is not a book that I would have wanted to read if I would have known beforehand what it was about. But because it was so mismarketed online, I read it and I started reading it, and I know myself, if I get hooked in a story, which I was near the end of book one, I was like, oh my fucking god, what is going to happen? Is she gonna be set free and stuff? So I did read book two, but I never willingly would have stepped into this experience if I knew. And that's why I'm making this video, because I don't want any other people to also fall into this marketing trap, because that's basically what it is. So my advice, if you're interested in Haunting Adeline, please beforehand read into the trigger warnings and then decide if you still want to read those books. Because I've read them, I can advise you not to read them. I would not advise anyone to read these books, honestly, because no, just no. A lot of things happening in these books are just wrong on so many levels that I'm just like... So I actually read Haunting Adeline book one on the EPUB, so on the digital version on my e-reader. However, the second book, Haunting Adeline, is too explicit and has not been like approved by Kobo, which is a reading platform that I read on. So I actually had to buy the physical version, which I bought on a convention. And right after reading it, I actually sold it. So I will never ever read those books again. I don't actually physically own them anymore. And it is not a book that I would ever recommend to anyone. So if you have read Haunting Adeline, how did you find out about these books? Was it also through online marketing, and how did you see it marketed? Because I feel like that was the biggest trap that I fell into onto Book Talk, is seeing people talking about it, being like, oh, it's such a good book, it's romance, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't, and I just feel like the marketing for this book was very good, but then the actual book wasn't. Again, all the opinions about the book that I've talked to you about in this video are my personal opinions about this book. If you really liked it, then you can really like it. It's just that I didn't. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up. And of course, if you haven't already and you'd like to be, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I make more videos every week and I would love to have you for every single one of them. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!